East African history, the Mau Mau Rebellion 1952–1956. The MAU Rebellion 1952–1956. This was a clandestine secret nationalistic movement in Kenya. It was formed by the ex-soldiers of World War I and II in 1946 to fight the colonial government. The phrase Mau Mau is an abbreviation of a Swahili slogan Nzongo Ntule Mwafrika. Apitu Hiru, loosely translated as the white man should return to Europe and the Africa. Its independence. The rebellion effectively began in 1952 and ended in 1960. Causes of the rebellion. Loss of land to the white settlers angered the Africans, especially the Kikuyu, and that's why they joined the movement in large numbers. Africans were pushed into reserve camps where conditions were unfavorable. For instance, they were overcrowded and lacked schools and medical centers. Mau Mau fighters were struggling for the independence of Kenya, i.e. most of the ex-soldiers had a negative view about colonialism. Poor labor conditions also forced Africans to join the Mau Mau movement, i.e. Africans were denied employment as better jobs were given only to the whites. Restrictions imposed on the growing of cash crops also angered the Africans, i.e. it were only the whites that were allowed to grow cash crops. The return of the World War I and II ex-soldiers led to the formation of the movement. When they compared the situation in Europe with that of Kenya, it was still backward. Africans were also against the introduction of the KIP and identity cards because it denied Africans freedom of movement. The Mau Mau resistance was also as a result of unfair taxation, i.e. the British introduced poll tax which was too high for the Africans. Africans were denied a chance of trading with their neighbours, Asians and the coastal people, because the trade was dominated by Indians or Asians. Mau Mau fighters also hated the European attitude towards African traditional beliefs and cultures, e.g. missionaries attacked the Kikuyu female circumcision. Africans were denied a chance of attaining Western education, and this was a deliberate move to keep them backward. East African history, the Mau Mau Rebellion 1952–1956. The emergence of able leaders also led to the formation of the movement, i.e. leadership was provided by elites such as Jomo Kenyatta, Harry Thuku, Bildad Kagia, Dedan Kimathi, General Chania Waruhu Aitat. Africans were also tired of the settlers' influence on government decisions and policies, i.e. the settlers wanted to turn Kenya into a settler colony like Rhodesia in South Africa. The Mau Mau fighters were not pleased by the revelations of the British government to effect constitutional changes in Kenya, i.e. they wanted greater African representation on the Legislative Council. The course of the rebellion. Mau Mau started in 1946 as an underground movement in Kenya to fight colonial government and bring independence as soon as possible. It was formed by the Kenya African Union extremist KAU, including the ex-soldiers of World War I and II. The movement was basically a tribal rebellion of the Kikuyu, and when fighting intensified, the rebellion spread to other communities such as Kamba, Meru, and Mbui, t.c. Mau Mau guerrillas and their supporters took oaths that bound them to obedience, secrecy, and support of the movement. The supporters of the movement sang hymns in which the name of Jomo was substituted for Jesus Christ. By 1950, the Mau Mau fighters started to act violently, and the British government declared the militant group illegal and unlawful. After being declared illegal, the guerrillas retreated to Aberdare Ranges and slopes of empty Kenya, where they launched attacks on the colonial government and white settler farms. They formed gangs which could steal arms, destroy plantations, and committed arson, burning property that belonged to the settlers, e.g. plantations, homes, etc. Many chiefs who opposed the movement were hacked to death, e.g. in October 1952 Chief Waruhu Kambu was murdered for being loyal to the government. On 20th of October 1952, the British Governor Sir Evelyn Baring declared a state of emergency. Sir Evelyn Baring called to the King S. African Rifles KAR to suppress the movement, and by the end of the year, more soldiers had been flown in from Britain. East African history, the Mau Mau Rebellion 1952–1956. By 1956, the movement had been weakened seriously, but the hunt for Mau Mau fighters continued up to 1960. Effects of the rebellion. The rebellion was so costly to the British government, i.e. the British spent over £50,000 to suppress the movement. Many African leaders and activists were arrested for opposing colonialism, e.g. Jomo Kenyatta, Dedan Kimathi, General Chania, etc. The rebellion taught the British that Kenyans seriously wanted independence and couldn't settle for anything less than that. There was massive destruction of property, e.g. shops were looted and gardens belonging to the white settlers were destroyed. Many families and clans disintegrated as a result of the chaos during the course of the movement. Due to the destruction of crops, food stores, and the unsettled life, agriculture declined and famine broke out. The rebellion led to a decline of Kenya's economy since trade and commerce came to a standstill. The rebellion shattered the white settlers' dream of turning Kenya into a settler colony like Rhodesia. Land that had belonged to the Africans before was reclaimed as the British changed the land policy. Africans were allowed to grow cash crops in schools, hospitals, roads were built to cool African tempers. The rebellion led to the emergence of leaders like Jomo Kenyatta, Tom Mboya, Daniel Arap Moi T.C. who spearheaded the independence struggle in Kenya. Political parties were formed and allowed to operate e.g. KANU Kenya African National Union, and they spearheaded the campaign for self-rule or independence. The rebellion created a period of confusion and uncertainty among the people e.g. between 1950 to 1960, Kenya was in a state of emergency. The British came to good terms with Africans. From this time, African interests gained. East African history, the Mau Mau Rebellion 1952-1956. Disunity among African societies also weakened their struggle against the imposition of colonial rule, and therefore they could not form a united front against the colonialists. The teachings of the Christian missionaries weakened African societies. They softened the hearts and minds of Africans to the extent that some could not see the need to fight the whites. Collaborators who supported colonial powers also weakened those resisting because they used to leak information to the colonialists. Many African societies were hit by diseases. The Kikuyu, Maasai, Nandi were, for example, hit by rinderpest, long periods of drought and famine that weakened them and therefore made their fight against European rule ineffective. Poor military tactics. African societies lacked military strategies. Many African chiefs were ignorant of the intentions of the Europeans. They thought that the whites were just visitors who were here for only a short period and as such took them to be their friends. The spirit of nationalism was lacking in many African societies at the time. Many rebellions were there for tribal or regional wars, lacking the support of their neighbors. The weak economies of many African societies contributed to their defeat. Many of these couldn't support full-scale wars. Too much belief in superstition and traditional religion also blindfolded Africans. The death and imprisonment of inspirational leaders also undermined African rebellions.